Hello everyone, and welcome to week 2 of APG5365 Principles of Global Media and Communications. I'm your unit coordinator, Dr. Karon Dan. This week we'll learn about one of the key approaches in the field of media and communications, and that is called political economy. Basically, political economy asks us who controls what and why should we care? It's essentially about understanding the organisation and production of media and communications. It's not very interested in the meaning of media texts, but rather how those products are produced and distributed, by whom, for whom, and with what results. So what is political economy? Political economy is a theoretical approach used by scholars that says the economy, or money and how it is structured, drives society. When we talk about society, particularly today, this increasingly includes media. So, when we take a political economy approach to try to explain the media and its effects, we are looking at who owns media, how they control it, and how this ownership and control transfers to power and influence in society. Like it or not, all of us are, to a certain extent, influenced by media, and thus by who owns the media. Even the 37% of the world's people who are not on the internet may be influenced by legacy media, that is, printed and broadcast information. In some areas of the world, this legacy media is still very important. My point is that media of some form or another are hugely important to our lives, and increasingly there is a realization that whoever produces this media is hugely important. In this unit, we're interested in perspectives from a communications and media studies point of view. Political economy of the media looks at the way media products are produced, distributed, and consumed, and also how they are regulated. These resources can include newspapers, TV shows, radio programs, films, and many other kinds of information, including digital information sources, of course. A political economy perspective is most interested in relationships of power and control. Who has it? Who wants it? And how does this affect production and distribution? We can also, of course, look at who does not have power and the consequences of not having a voice in the media. Scholars in this field want to understand how media and control of the media have a flow-on effect on the media and communications products that consumers receive. Although we have much more choice in what media we want to access these days, we can still, of course, choose only from what is offered to us or from what we can find, which includes what we have access to. Political economy analysis is also interested in how communications and media relate to other spheres of society, such as politics, economics, and industries. Scholars strive to understand more about the structural links between media and communications and other forces of society. Over hundreds of years, since the first printed newspapers in Germany from 1609, and even before that time, there have been many different models of media organizational structure. Today, these include, but are not limited to, the following: private commercial, private not-for-profit, wholly government-owned, funded and directed, publicly funded but autonomous, that is, funded by taxes but not controlled by government, a combination of commercial and publicly funded, or public but funded by private organisations rather than government money. It's important to consider also that control is not just about ownership. It can also be about the structures within which communications and media industries operate. The political economy approach has begun to focus more specifically on media, and thus has become very important to communications and media studies. There are two reasons this has happened. One of them is the emergence of very big multinational media and telecommunications companies. Another name for them is conglomerates. These companies are focused on profits, on commodities and industry. An example is News Corp, a majority of which is owned by the Australian US billionaire Rupert Murdoch. And the second reason is the rising role of governments as media producers and regulators. We'll consider the first reason in this video and the second reason in the next video. Let's now consider the emergence of the corporate model of organisation and production. This has become dominant across most sectors in our economies, in all kinds of different parts of the world. As a result, if we look at media and communications industries today, we also see the spread of increasingly large transnational conglomerates that operate across countries and even across continents. As you can see on the slide, however, the vast majority of the top 10 are based in the US, all but 2 in this list. However, remember that this list is based on market capitalization of companies. If you were to look at, say, audience reach, the list would be different. So hopefully in tutorials this week, we can consider some of these different ways of looking at companies and their importance. Scholars of political economy are very interested in the nature of market concentration, is one example. This is when only a very few companies dominate a market, known as oligopolies. This is referred to as centralization of media ownership. It often leads to calls to increase diversity, participation and access, to break down those oligopolies of large corporations, to make space for smaller and more diverse voices. Smaller independent companies, for example, might enable media to become more vibrant and diverse. That is one analysis anyway, and not the only one. When centralization concerns commercial media, there is criticism that concerns of profit and loss can eclipse concerns of public interest, quality, and accountability. Australia, for example, has one of the most centralized media ownership concentrations in the world. Commonly, media conglomerates include a mix of broadcast media, newspapers, magazines, and other digital platforms such as gaming. These are increasingly very diversified transnational conglomerates. This is known as horizontal integration, when companies take over related businesses, often their competitors, but complementary industries also. Almost all of the big media companies today practice horizontal integration, and sometimes they purchase their competitors just to close them down. You might also hear the term media convergence in relation to this business consolidation, which refers to media digitization practices that merge previously separate media types. For example, the integration of news and broadcasting sites, of TV and movie streaming services. This results in fewer and fewer companies owning more and more media and more media types. The companies might also have vertical integration, which means taking over the production of multiple elements of the production process. Amazon is a brilliant example of both horizontal and vertical integration, as well as of media convergence. These corporations continue to acquire new companies and to get larger. There is no sign yet of this conglomeration lessening. What we're interested in trying to understand then is how the rise of this corporate model is affecting the way our media and communications industries operate, and how important a factor centralisation is in how media and communications companies influence society. In the next video, we'll be looking at some other equally important concerns covered in the political economy approach.